In a field in the highlands of northern Ethiopia, a stone lies on its side, 33 meters long, 520 tons, carved to resemble a building of 13 stories. The men who quarried it tried to raise it once. It fell. The civilization that built it never tried again. In the 3rd century after Christ, a Persian prophet named Mani sat down to list the great powers of the world. He was building a religion of his own, one that he believed would unite Rome and Persia and the East under a single faith. To do that, he needed to know who held the world. He named Rome, he named Persia, he named China, and then, fourth, he named a kingdom that almost no one in the modern West remembers. He named Aksum. Axum struck the first gold coins ever minted south of the Sahara. Axum became the second nation on earth to adopt Christianity as its state religion, before Rome did. Axum garrisoned soldiers across the Red Sea in the mountains of Yemen. Axum, in the 7th century, gave shelter to the first refugees of Islam. Axum crowned emperors of Ethiopia until the year 1930. And for more than 1,000 years, Axum was almost erased from the mental map of the West. How did a city perched on the Ethiopian highlands become one of the 4 pillars of the ancient world? How did it command both shores of the Red Sea, with a fleet that crossed the strait 7 centuries before the First Crusade? How did it convert to Christianity before Constantine? How did its king protect the faith of Muhammad against the envoys of Mecca? And why, after 1,000 years of power, did it vanish, leaving behind a fallen obelisk, a chapel that still guards what its monks call the Ark of the Covenant, and the sentence of a king who said in 3 languages that he believed in the Son of God? This is the full history of the kingdom of Axum. From a temple of the moon raised without mortar 27 centuries ago to the last gold coin struck in the year 700, from the Queen of Sheba to the asylum granted to the companions of the prophet, from the largest stone ever lifted by human hands to a holy city abandoned but still crowning emperors. The story of one of the 4 great powers of the earth, told in 50 minutes. The mason wipes the dust from his eyes with the back of his wrist. The sun is high. His shoulders ache from yesterday's lifting and from the day before that. In his hand, a copper chisel. At his feet, a block of pale limestone that he and his crew have hauled from a quarry called Wukro, 80 kilometers across broken country. The block weighs more than he does. He has hundreds more to move. The year is roughly 700 before Christ. He is on a hillside in what is today the Tigray region of northern Ethiopia. He is building a temple. The temple is for a god who is not, originally, his own. The god is Almaka, the moon god of the Sabaeans, whose homeland lies across the Red Sea in what we now call Yemen. The Sabaeans have been crossing the strait for centuries. They have brought their alphabet, their gods, their irrigation. The Masons people, the indigenous Cushitic farmers of these highlands, have absorbed some of it and refused some of it. The kingdom they live in is called Dumt. He fits one block on top of another without mortar, stone against stone. The walls of this temple will rise 14 meters. They will support no roof of wood. They will hold each other up by weight and friction and the patience of men whose names will be lost. 27 centuries later, the walls are still standing. Yeha is the oldest standing structure in sub-Saharan Africa. The Temple of Almaka looks down on a small church that the Ethiopians built next to it in the 5th century to claim the holiness of the place for Christ. The church was made of older stones robbed from the temple itself. The 2 buildings stand side by side. a Sabaean god and a Christian god sharing the foundations. Almaka's worshippers are gone. The kingdom of Dumpt is gone. The men who carved the limestone are gone. But the temple remains, and the question it asks remains with it. Who were these people? What did they believe they were doing when they pulled white stone across 80 kilometers of African mountain and laid it dry against the sky? We do not know. The kingdom of Dumpt left almost no writing of its own. We have inscriptions in 2 scripts. We have the names of perhaps 4 kings. We have a temple. We have silence. A farmer in the Tigray Highlands kneels beside a low stone wall and presses his palm against it. The wall is older than his grandfather, older than his grandfather's grandfather. The stones were laid without mortar by men whose names no one in his village remembers. He runs his hand along the seam where one block meets another. The fit is still tight. The year is roughly 200 before Christ. The farmer is one of perhaps a few hundred who live in this valley. 3 generations ago, his ancestors served kings. The kings are gone. The temple at Yeha, an hour's walk from his home, is still standing, but no one prays there anymore. The kingdom that the Greeks and the Sabaeans called Dumpt has collapsed, sometime in the previous 2 centuries, and no one wrote down why. This is the first hard problem in the history of Aksum. The kingdom that will rise here, one of the 4 great powers Mani would name, is born in a silence that no document fills. Around the 2nd century before Christ, a federation of small chieftains begins to consolidate around a settlement on a high plateau near a sacred grove of trees. The settlement is called Aksum. Aksum sits at 2,000 meters above sea level. The air is thin. The rains are reliable. From this plateau, 4 worlds are within reach. To the north, the Nile Valley and the Kingdom of Meroe. To the east, the Red Sea coast and the port that will be called Adulis. Across that sea, the Arabian Peninsula and the incense roads of Yemen. Beyond that, the Indian Ocean, India, Ceylon, and China. Axum is not the largest city in this region. It is not the oldest, but it is the city that sits at the point where 4 trading systems meet. Whoever controls Axum can tax the road from the Nile to the sea. And by the 1st century after Christ, someone is doing exactly that. We do not have his name from his own people. We have it from a Greek-speaking sailor in Roman Egypt, who has never been to Axum but has talked to merchants who have. The sailor is writing a manual for the captains of ships that sail the Red Sea. And on one page of that manual, in Greek, we read the first sentence ever written about an Axumite king. The king's name is Zoskalis. He rules the coast. He is, the sailor writes, miserly in his dealings, eager for more, but versed in Greek letters. A young woman climbs the path up Beata Georgis with a clay jar of water balanced on her head. The path is steep. The water sloshes against her neck with every step. She has done this walk every morning since she was a child. At the top of the hill where the elite quarter of the city begins, she will deliver the jar to a household that pays her family in grain and in protection. Below her, to the south, the rooftops of Axum spread out across the plateau. To the north, the path keeps climbing toward the palace of the king. She does not know the king's name. Her father knows it. The hill she climbs every morning, archaeologists today call Beata Georgis, and beneath its grass lie the foundations of the city's first elite quarter. Stone houses, storage pits full of grain, imported pottery from Meroe, from Egypt, from southern Arabia, Roman coins, Sabaean silver, fragments of Indian ware. By the 1st century after Christ, this hill has been growing for 200 years. The king at the top is called, in the language his court is beginning to write down, the Negus. Soon, his successors will call themselves Negus Negesti, the King of Kings, in deliberate echo of the Persian title. Below him, smaller kings of smaller territories pay tribute. Above him, no one. Aksum is the sun. The lesser thrones orbit. What does this king rule over? He rules over a road. The road begins at the port of Adulis, on the Red Sea coast, where ships from Egypt and India and Arabia unload their cargo. The road climbs 2,000 meters up the escarpment through villages of farmers and traders until it reaches the plateau. Every bale of silk, every tusk of ivory, every measure of frankincense that moves between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean and chooses this route pays the king of Aksum, and much of it does choose this route. The alternative is to sail around the southern tip of Arabia, through pirate waters, against the monsoon, with no friendly port for 1,000 kilometers. Aksum offers a friendly port, a paved road, and a king who, in the words of a Greek sailor, is versed in Greek letters. He is reading the customs of his customers. He is making himself legible to the world. The world, in turn, is beginning to read him. The sailor sits on a low wooden bench in the back of a dockside tavern in Berenice. The lamp on the table has burned low. Salt has dried on the back of his neck from yesterday's crossing. In front of him, a sheet of papyrus, weighted at one corner with a copper cup. In his hand, a reed pen. He is trying to remember everything a Yemeni captain told him last week about the African coast before he forgets it. He is a Greek-speaking merchant or ship's officer working out of an Egyptian port in the middle of the 1st century after Christ. He has sailed parts of the route himself. The rest he has from colleagues, from harbor masters, from interpreters in dockside taverns, just like this one. He is compiling it all into one continuous coastline, port by port, from Egypt, south along the African coast, then east across the mouth of the Red Sea, around Arabia and on to India. When he reaches the African coast just south of the Red Sea, he describes a port called Adulis. He tells the captains what to bring there: cloth from Egypt, glass, brass, iron tools, olive oil, wine. He tells them what to take away: ivory in great quantity from elephants killed 5 days inland, tortoise shell, rhinoceros horn, obsidian for fine knives, and he tells them in one sentence who to deal with. The sentence is short. It says, in Greek, the ruler of these regions, from the Moskofagi country to the rest of Barbaria, is Zoskales, miserly in his way of life and always striving for more, but otherwise upright and acquainted with Greek letters. This is the first portrait of an Aksumite king. He is not a god. He is not a hero. He is a working monarch, hard at trade, careful with his money, ambitious, literate. The sailor's tone is the tone of a merchant evaluating a counterparty. What is striking is what is not in the sentence. The sailor does not call Zoskales a king of barbarians. He does not marvel. He gives him exactly the same paragraph he gives the rulers of Yemen and Petra and the Malabar coast. Axum, in the year 50 after Christ, is already inside the world. It is one of the houses on the merchant street. Zoskales reads Greek. We know almost nothing else about him. We have a single line of a Greek manual, surviving because medieval Byzantine scribes thought sailors' manuals were worth preserving. From that line, we know that Axum had a king, that the king was literate in the lingua franca of long-distance trade, and that the world was already taking notes. The notes will multiply. The next traveler to write down what he sees in the kingdom of the Highlands will not be a sailor, he will be a prophet. Mani sits cross-legged on a thin reed mat in a stone room somewhere in Mesopotamia. The light comes from a single oil lamp. He is not young. His back hurts. In front of him, an unrolled scroll, weighted with 2 small river stones. In his hand, a stylus. He is making a list. The year is somewhere around 250 after Christ. Mani is 34 years old. From childhood, he has seen visions. He believes he has been chosen as the final prophet, the seal of all earlier revelations. He is building a religion that will absorb Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and Buddhism into one faith for the whole earth. To do that, he has to know where the earth is. The list survives fragmentarily in a Coptic codex found in Egypt in the 20th century. It says this: there are 4 great kingdoms in the world: the kingdom of the Romans, the kingdom of the Persians, the kingdom of the Silios, meaning the Chinese, and the kingdom of the Axumites. Mani has never been to Aksum. He probably never met an Axumite, but he has talked to merchants on the trade roads, and what he has heard is enough for him to place this kingdom of the African Highlands in the same tier as Rome and China. By the time Mani writes those words, Axum is no longer a confederation of small chieftains. Axum has a navy. Axum has subdued the kingdoms of southern Arabia at least once. Axum controls the African shore of the Red Sea. And Axum, around the year 270, does something that no African kingdom south of the Sahara has ever done. A king named Endibis sits in the mint at Axum. Before him is a small disk of gold, still warm from the fire. The weight is calibrated to half a Roman aureus, so that an Axumite coin and a Roman coin will trade cleanly against each other. The die is engraved in Greek. It reads, Endibis, King of the Axumites. Above his head, a crescent and a disk, the old symbols of the moon god and the sun. The hammer falls, the gold cools, the first coin minted in sub-Saharan Africa rolls onto the cloth. It will not be the last. For 400 years, Axumite kings will mint in gold, in silver, and in bronze. The gold will travel as far as India and Sri Lanka. The empire is now legible to anyone who can hold a coin. Stop for a moment. Let us see where we are. We have walked from a temple in Yeha, raised 27 centuries ago, without mortar, to a mint in Aksum where a king named Endibis stamped his face onto gold. Between those 2 moments, 2,000 years. A kingdom whose name vanished and a kingdom whose name traveled on coins into the bazaars of Sri Lanka. But I want to say something now. The history we are telling is, for the most part, told by others, by the Greek sailor, by the Persian prophet, soon by Syrian monks, by Arab chroniclers, by Italian archaeologists. Axum left brief inscriptions, coins, stones without text. We are listening to the world describe a country that did not always describe itself. That matters because we are about to enter the 4th century. And in the 4th century, a Syrian boy will wash up on the shore of the Red Sea, the only survivor of a shipwreck, and that boy will become the tutor of a king. The king is called Ezana, and he will stand before a stone carved in 3 languages, and he will say in all 3 that he believes in the Son of God. Picture the courtyard of the palace, pale stone under the Highland sun. The young prince, still a boy, sitting at the feet of a tutor who washed up on a beach as a slave. Behind them, the altar of Marem, the war god, still burning. Marem is still listening, but not for much longer. Back to the story. The man at the front of the rope team braces his feet against the stone wedge driven into the ground for him. The rope is thick as his wrist. It cuts into his palms, even through the leather wrappings. To his left and right, 12 other men hold the same line. Behind them, 12 more. He cannot see the back of the team. He can only feel the rope. The rope is humming. Something on the other end is starting to move. He is one of perhaps 1,000 men working the ropes around the Great Stele, on the northern edge of the city of Aksum, in the field where the kings are buried. The year is somewhere late in the 3rd century, or early in the 4th. The stele he is helping to lift is 33 meters long, 520 tons, carved with 13 false stories, false windows on every level, a door at the base with a handle, as if a king might walk out of it. The tomb beneath, called Nefas Maucha, has been dug to receive its base. The stele begins to rise. The puller's arms go tight. The men behind him pull against the men ahead of him. In the rhythm the foreman calls. The line moves a hand's breadth, then another. The base lifts off the rollers. The angle is shifting. Almost there. Something gives. We do not know exactly what. A rope, a wedge, a roller cracking under the weight. The 33-meter monument falls. It crashes sideways across the burial chamber the Axumites had built to receive its base, and it crushes the chamber's roof. The stele lies there to this day in 7 pieces, exactly where it landed, perhaps 1,600 years ago. No one tried again. The stele of Aksum, a smaller monolith of 24 meters, still stands in the field, the tallest single piece of stone ever quarried, dressed, and erected by ancient human beings anywhere in the world. The Italian army stole it in 1937. In 2005, Italy gave it back. Within a generation of the failed lift, the kings of Axum would have a different reason to leave their dead unmarked. They were about to become Christians. And the new god did not want obelisks. Frumentius is 14 years old. The waves are higher than the ship. Salt water hits him in the face every few seconds. He is holding onto a length of rope tied to the mast, and he cannot let go because he cannot swim. Beside him, his cousin Aedesius is doing the same. Neither of them has spoken in an hour. The captain, their uncle Meropius, is shouting orders at the crew, but the wind takes most of the words. The ship is a Tyrian merchant vessel, blown off course in the southern Red Sea. The year is roughly 316 after Christ. Meropius is a Christian Syrian, a philosopher by reputation who has taken his 2 young relatives along on a trading voyage as part of their education. The voyage is not going well. The ship puts in at a port that has just broken its treaty with the Romans. The crew is killed. Meropius is killed. The 2 boys, by some grace or some calculation of the men who find them, are spared. They are taken up the escarpment, 2,000 meters, to the city of Axum. They are presented to the king as slaves. The king sees that the boys are educated. He keeps them. He puts Aedesius in charge of his cupbearers. He puts Frumentius in charge of his correspondence. They learn Ge'ez. They serve the court. The king dies. His widow asks the boys to stay on as tutors and administrators while her son, the heir, grows up. The heir is a small child. His name is Ezana. For roughly 15 years, Frumentius helps run the kingdom. He is, in effect, regent in everything but title. He is also quietly a Christian. He gathers the foreign Christian merchants in the city, Egyptians and Syrians passing through Adulis. He gives them places to meet, to pray, to read scripture. There is no Aksumite church yet. There are only foreigners praying in foreign houses. The heir grows up watching them. When Ezana takes the throne, Frumentius asks for permission to leave. He sails to Alexandria. There he finds the new bishop, a man named Athanasius. Frumentius tells him about Aksum. He asks the patriarch to send a bishop, a real bishop, to ordain priests, to baptize, to build the church. Athanasius listens. Then he turns to Frumentius and says, "Who better than you?" He consecrates Frumentius bishop on the spot, bishop of Axum, the first. Frumentius sails back. The Syrian shipwreck victim, now a bishop of the Church of Alexandria, returns to the city where he had once been a slave and finds his former pupil sitting on the throne. He baptizes him. Axum, by this single act, becomes the second nation on earth to adopt Christianity as a state religion. Only Armenia, 15 years earlier, has done it before. Ezana stands beside the workbench in the mint at Aksum and watches the master engraver finish the new die. The room smells of charcoal and hot bronze. The engraver is using a small punch and a copper hammer, working a shape into a steel disc. Above the king's head, on the new die, there will no longer be the crescent and the disc, the symbols of the moon god and the sun. There will be a cross. The kingdom Ezana rules is, in name, Christian. But naming is not yet doing. The altars of Marem still burn. To make Christianity real in Axum, he has to write it down. He starts with the coins. It is the first state coinage in human history to bear the Christian cross, earlier than Rome. Anyone in Aksum or in Adulis or in the markets of India who handles that coin now holds in their palm the new direction of a kingdom. Then he writes the stone. Ezana has gone to war against his northern neighbor, the kingdom of Meroe in Nubia, which has been raiding Aksumitid territory. He marches an army down into the Nile Valley, defeats Meroe, and on his way home, he commissions a stele, a modest column of granite with a flat face. His scribes carve an inscription on it. They carve it 3 times. Once in Ge'ez, in the old unvocalized script. Once in Ge'ez again, in a new vocalized script that Ezana's reign helps to invent. Once in Greek, for the merchants and ambassadors of the wider world. The text is the same in all 3, and in its opening, instead of invoking Marem, Ezana invokes a different power. In Greek, in Ge'ez again, he writes, "By the faith in God and the power of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, who saved my kingdom for me." The stone still stands. You can see it in Aksum today, in a small pavilion next to a parking lot. 3 columns of script side by side. The first official Trinitarian inscription by a king in the history of Africa, and one of the earliest anywhere in the world. The kingdom that had served the moon god of the Sabaeans for 1,000 years now belongs, by royal decree, to the god of the Syrian boy who washed up on its shore. Cosmas Indicopleustes stands on the marble esplanade of Adulis with his wax tablet open in his left hand and a stylus in his right. The sun is high. The wind off the Red Sea smells of salt and something else, a richer smell, the cargo coming off 3 ships unloading behind him. He is not looking at the ships. He is looking at a marble throne set up near the customs office and copying down, line by line, the Greek inscription carved on its back. The year is roughly 520 after Christ. Cosmas is a Greek-speaking Egyptian merchant in middle age who has been to India and Sri Lanka. He is going to write a book about everything he has seen, and he is going to call it the Christian topography. The throne is older than him. He cannot date it. It lists the conquests of an Aksumite king whose name he does not recognize. Cosmas is one stop on a long route. Aksum, by the year 500, controls roughly 2.5 million square kilometers on both sides of the strait, north and west into the Sudanese borderlands, south into what is today southern Ethiopia, east across the water into Yemen and the western coast of the Arabian Peninsula. The capital is in the Highlands. The lungs are at the sea. The cargo coming off those 3 ships is the cargo of half the world. African ivory in tons, bound for the workshops of Constantinople. Frankincense and myrrh from the Highlands and the southern Arabian shore. Gold dust from a region the Axumites call Sasu, somewhere in the Sudanese savannah. Going the other way, into Aksumite hands come Egyptian linen, Syrian glass, Indian pepper, Sri Lankan cinnamon, Chinese silk, Persian carpets, Mediterranean wine. Hoards have been found in Mangalore, on the southwestern coast of India, with Aksumite gold, beside Roman gold, beside Sasanian silver, all sleeping together in the same jar for 1,500 years. A few decades before Cosmas arrived, a movement had begun from the north. 9 Syrian monks, fleeing the religious wars of the Eastern Roman Empire over the nature of Christ, sailed south. They landed at Adulis. They climbed the escarpment. They settled in the Aksumite highlands and began to build monasteries. They translated the Bible into Ge'ez. They established the liturgy that will, in slightly evolved form, still be sung in Ethiopian Orthodox churches today. They are remembered collectively as the 9 Saints. Their names are still recited at every Mass. Axum is no longer the destination of the shipwrecked. It is the destination of the deliberate, of monks and merchants and ambassadors. The kingdom that once received its first Christian bishop by accident is now sending bishops, minting gold crosses, and copying scripture that travels as far as China. Caleb stands at the edge of the dock at Gabaza and watches the last of the supply boats pull away from the pier. The morning wind off the Red Sea is cold for this time of year. The wood under his sandals is wet. Salt has crusted on the rope coiled by his foot. Across 30 kilometers of open water, the coast of Arabia is a thin gray line on the horizon. Behind him, the rigging of more than 200 ships creaks in the wind. He is going to war. The year is 525 after Christ. The fleet behind him is the largest assembled by any African power in antiquity, an expeditionary force of, by the most credible accounts, 120,000 men. The reason is religious. Across the strait in the kingdom of Himyar, a king named Yusuf, called Du Nuwas in the Arabic sources, has converted to Judaism and has moved against the Christians of his realm. The bishops of Najran have not survived. The churches there have not survived. The survivors who reach the coast send word to Constantinople. They send word to Aksum. The Byzantine emperor, Justin I, writes to Caleb. The message is the same. You are the Christian power closest to them. You can cross. Caleb crosses. The Aksumite navy, built for trade, is rebuilt for war. The fleet sails from Gabaza into the Bab el-Mandeb, the Gate of Tears, the narrow strait that joins the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. The army lands on the western coast of Yemen. They march inland. They take the Himyarite capital. Du Nuwas, by the Arab tradition, rode his horse into the sea. He was not seen again. Caleb enters the Yemeni highlands as a conqueror. He installs a Christian client king. He sets up a stele at Marib, the ancient capital of the Sabaeans, the same Sabaeans who, 11 centuries earlier, had brought the moon god Almaka across the strait in the other direction to the temple at Yeha. The wheel has turned. Almaka is gone. A Christian king of the African highlands stands in Marib and inscribes a victory on stone. The inscription survives. It says, in part, "They have horses and chariots, but we shall be magnified by the name of the Lord our God. They have stumbled and fallen, but we have risen and stand upright. For roughly 80 years Axum will hold both shores of the Red Sea. The kingdom is now at its largest extent in its entire history, 2.5 million square kilometers, dominating the trade between 3 continents. This is the apex. It is also, though no one in Axum yet knows it, the moment of maximum overreach. The campaign has cost more than the treasury can comfortably spare. The plague that will be called the Plague of Justinian is, at this very moment, beginning to move along the Red Sea trade routes. The harvests of the Highlands are starting to thin. And in a generation, in the Arabian deserts to the east, a man will be born in the city of Mecca, whose great-grandchildren will sweep all of this away. Caleb does not know any of that. According to Aksumite tradition, he ends his life as a monk on a hill above the city. He sends his crown to Jerusalem to be hung in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The kingdom has reached the height it was built for. From here, every step is downward. Abraha stands at the edge of the construction yard in Sana'a and watches the masons set the keystone of the central arch. The dust is white. The sun is hot against the back of his neck. His foreman, a Greek-speaking architect from Alexandria, is gesturing toward the top of the scaffolding and shouting in 3 languages at once. Abraha does not interrupt. He is paying for this church. He intends it to be the most beautiful Christian building in the entire Arabian Peninsula. The year is somewhere in the late 500s. Abraha had originally been an officer in Caleb's invasion force. He stayed in Yemen. He made himself indispensable, and when the moment came, he stopped being a viceroy and became a king in his own right. Caleb tried twice to send armies across the strait to remove him. Both failed. Abraha holds. He sends tribute. He acknowledges Aksumite supremacy in his inscriptions, but he rules Yemen as his own kingdom. The cathedral is called Al-Khalis. It is intended to draw pilgrims away from the older shrines of pagan Arabia, intended, by some accounts, to draw pilgrims away from a black stone in a place called Mecca. According to Islamic tradition, in the year 570 after Christ, Abraha decides to make that intention literal. He raises an army. He puts an elephant at its head, perhaps several elephants, war elephants in the African style. He marches north, up the Arabian Peninsula, toward Mecca. His goal is to destroy the Kaaba, the cube-shaped sanctuary that holds the black stone, and force the pilgrimage routes to bend toward his cathedral. He never gets there. Outside Mecca, his army is destroyed. The Islamic sources speak of birds dropping stones from the sky. Modern historians speak of an outbreak of disease, possibly smallpox, that ripped through the camp. Either way, the elephant turns. The army retreats. Abraha returns to Sana'a and dies soon after. The year his army was destroyed is, according to the same Islamic tradition, the year a child was born in Mecca whose name was Muhammad, the year of the elephant. The Quran preserves the event in its 105th chapter, called Al-Fil, the elephant. Have you not seen, it asks, what your Lord did to the companions of the elephant? Did he not make their plan go astray? The reach of Axum by the late 6th century has touched the founding myth of Islam itself. Saif ibn D. Yazan kneels on the patterned carpet of the audience hall in Ctesiphon and waits for the Shahanshah to speak. The hall is enormous. The ceiling is painted with stars. The throne in front of him is a single block of white stone, raised on 3 steps. He has been kneeling for what feels like an hour. His knees hurt. His mouth is dry. Khosrow I, King of Kings of the Sasanian Empire, is examining a small silver dish on a side table and ignoring him. Saif is a young Himyarite noble, descended from the kings of Yemen who lost their throne when Caleb of Aksum crossed the strait 2 generations earlier. He has come east, across the Arabian deserts, to ask the great power of the East to do what the great power of the South had done to his grandfather. He has come to ask Persia to invade Yemen. Khosrow finally speaks. Khosrow is cautious. He has wars on every other border, but Saif is persistent, and the prize is real. Yemen sits on the southern entrance to the Red Sea, on the spice routes, on the incense roads. To control Yemen is to put a hand around the throat of the trade between Axum and India. Khosrow gives Saif a small force, 800 prisoners released from death row by some accounts. They sail south in 8 ships. 2 of the ships sink, 6 arrive. 600 convict soldiers under a Persian general named Warez land on the Yemeni coast. It is enough. The Axumite garrison is exhausted. Local Himyarites rise to support the Persians. Within a single campaign season, the sons of Abraha are dead, and the Axumite presence in Yemen is over. The Persian flag flies over Sana'a. The cathedral that Abraha built is left to fall into ruin. Axum has lost the Arabian shore. It has also begun to lose the Red Sea. The plague of Justinian, which broke out in the eastern Mediterranean in 541, has been moving through the trade routes for 30 years. The cities that once bought Axumite ivory have been depopulated. Demand has collapsed. The harvests of the Highlands, after centuries of intensive cultivation, are starting to thin. The rains are growing less reliable. Adulis is shipping less. The mint is striking less. Inside the kingdom, no one writes any of this down. The story has to be reconstructed from coins that grow lighter, from inscriptions that grow shorter, from layers of soil at Adulis that show fewer foreign goods. Aksum is contracting in silence. But before the silence fully closes, one more story will be told, and it will be told from the other side. Ja'far ibn Abi Talib steps off the merchant ship onto the wet sand of Adulis and looks up at the escarpment. The cliffs rise 2,000 meters above him. His sandals are soaked. The fabric of his cloak is heavy with salt. Behind him, his cousin's daughter Ruqayya and her husband Uthman are still on board, gathering the small bundles they brought. Beside him, 10 other men and 3 other women are stepping into ankle-deep water. They have been at sea for moons. The year is 615 after Christ. In Mecca, the city they have just fled, a small group of men and women who follow Ja'far's cousin Muhammad have been beaten in the streets. Some have died. The dominant tribe of Mecca, the Quraysh, has decided that this new movement is a threat. Muhammad gathered the most exposed of his followers and told them this: "There is a king across the sea in the land of Abyssinia. He is a Christian, but he does not tolerate injustice. Go to him. Stay there until God provides relief." 15 of them sailed. Uthman, who will one day be the 3rd caliph of Islam, was one. Ruqayya, Muhammad's own daughter, was another. They crossed the strait. They climbed the escarpment. They reached the city of Aksum and they asked for asylum. The king received them. His name, in the Arabic sources, is Ashama ibn Abijar. The Aksumite tradition does not preserve a clear royal name from this period, and so we know him by the title the Arabs gave him, Nagashi in their language, the Negus. He grants the asylum. The refugees are given houses. Mecca learns where they have gone, and the Quraysh send envoys with gifts to demand their return. The envoys carry tribute for the king and for his bishops. They tell the Negus that these refugees are dangerous, that they have abandoned the religion of their fathers, that they are not even good Christians. Hand them over. The Negus calls the refugees to court. He puts the question to them directly. Who are you, and what do you teach? The man who answers is Jafar. He recites, in Arabic, a passage from the New Revelation. The passage is from the Surah of Mary. It tells the story of Maryam, the mother of Jesus, of the angel that came to her, of the child she bore. The Christian bishops in the Aksumite court are listening. The Quraysh envoys are listening. The Negus is listening. The verses end. There is silence. The bishops, by the Arabic tradition, are weeping. The Negus picks up his royal staff. He walks down from his throne. He bends and draws a thin line in the dust of the floor. He looks at the Quraysh envoys. He says, "What separates my faith from theirs is no wider than this line." He refuses to hand them over. The envoys leave. The refugees stay. Some of them remain in Axum for 15 years. Some return to Arabia only after Muhammad has triumphed in Medina. The Negus sends his own emissaries to Medina to confirm his alliance with the Prophet. When the Negus dies, the year is roughly 630. Muhammad receives the news in Medina. He gathers his community. He prays the funeral prayer in absentia, the Salat al-Ghaib, for a Christian king buried in a Christian cemetery in the African Highlands. It is the only time in his life he is recorded as praying that prayer for someone outside the Ummah. The mint master lifts his copper hammer, places the upper die against the warm bronze blank, and brings the hammer down. The blank flattens, the image cuts, the coin slides off the anvil onto the cloth. He picks it up and turns it in his fingers. The face on it is a king named Hatazas. He does not know it yet, but this coin will be one of the last ever minted in the kingdom of Axum. The year is around 700 after Christ. For 4 centuries, Aksumite kings have struck in gold, in silver, and in bronze. The gold has traveled as far as India and Sri Lanka. Now the mint is closing. What killed it is not a battle. It is a chain. In 630, the Negus dies. In 632, Muhammad dies. In 639, Arab armies cross into Egypt. By 642, Alexandria has fallen. The patriarch who once sent bishops to Axum is gone. The Red Sea is no longer a Christian sea. Axum holds, for a while, on the African shore. But trade collapses. Adulis is abandoned with no battle, no siege, no record. Excavations show a port simply emptying. The capital moves south into the highlands of central Ethiopia, to a city the Arab geographers call Kubar. They mention it for 2 centuries. Then no one mentions it again. Where Kubar stood, archaeologists today do not know. Around 960, according to Ethiopian chronicles, a queen called Kudit rises in revolt. She burns the churches. She kills the last king of the line that traced its ancestry back to Solomon. The archaeology shows churches burning around that period. After Gudit, silence. Then, in the 12th century, a new dynasty rises, the Zagwe. They build, in a remote highland village called Lalibela, 11 churches carved downward into solid volcanic rock. The Zagwe are followed in the 13th century by a dynasty that calls itself Solomonic, claiming descent from the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. That dynasty will rule Ethiopia until 1974. Every emperor of that line, including the last one, Haile Selassie, will be crowned at Aksum, among the broken obelisks, in the church of Mariam Tzion, where the priests say the Ark of the Covenant has been kept since the time of Solomon, guarded by a single monk who never leaves the chapel. The kingdom is gone, the capital is forgotten, but the city is still being used. Who tells the story of Aksum? The Greeks tell it in the Periplus about the port of Adulis and the ivory of 5 days inland. Mani of Persia tells it when he lists the 4 powers of the world. Procopius of Byzantium tells it when he writes about Caleb and the Christian fleet. The Syrian monks tell it in the book of the Himyarites about the martyrs of Najran. Cosmas Indicopleustes tells it when he copies the inscription at Adulis and says the city has elephants in its streets. Ibn Ishaq tells it in Arabic when he describes the line in the dust. The German archaeologists tell it when they uncover Yeha. The Italian archaeologists tell it after they take the stele to Rome and give it back, 68 years later. Aksum itself left little. Inscriptions in 3 languages. Coins, first with the moon and the sun, then with the cross. Obelisks with false windows that opened onto nothing. And a chapel in Mariam Tzion, guarded by a single monk who never leaves the inner room. The wood of the door is dark with age. The lamp inside burns continuously. The priests say the Ark of the Covenant rests there, brought from Jerusalem, they say, by the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. The monks succeed each other. Each one, before he dies, chooses the next. Each one in his time swears that he has seen it. No archaeologist has ever entered. I cannot tell you what is in there. I can tell you that there, in that chapel, lives the part of the history of Axum that survived the kingdom whole. Because here is the point. Axum falls as a kingdom. Axum does not fall as a civilization. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church goes on, in Ge'ez, with the same liturgy that Frumentius began to translate. The script is still the same. The city is still holy. The Negus Najashi still has his mosque in Nagash, in Tigray, said to be among the most sacred mosques in Africa, near the graves of companions of the prophet who were buried in Ethiopian soil. The line he drew in the dust 1,400 years ago still separates very little. Think back to where we began, a mason on a hill in Yeha, 27 centuries ago, fitting a block of pale limestone against another block without mortar. He did not write his name. He did not need to. The stones held. They are still holding. And 1,400 years after him, a king in a courtyard in the same Highlands draws a line in the dust with his staff and says, "What separates my faith from theirs is no wider than this." He too did not write his name. The Arabs gave him one after the fact. We use it because we have to use something. There is a pattern here. The names that Axum left to history are mostly the names that other people gave to it. Zoskalas in a Greek manual, Nagashi in an Arabic chronicle, the 9 saints in a tradition that does not always agree on which 9. The kingdom was, more often than we are used to, a presence without a signature. It built, it traded, it converted, it welcomed, it did not always sign. The largest stele ever lifted by human hands fell before it could stand. But the civilization that tried to lift it did not fall. It went on, in silence, in a language that few today can read, in a faith that survived 1,000 years of Islamic encirclement, in a memory that 3 worlds kept in 3 languages. The story of Axum, forgotten by the West, was written down by the visitors, by the partners, by the refugees, which may be the most Axumite way to survive there is. The Negus dies in 630. 12 years later, Arab armies take Egypt. The Red Sea changes hands forever. Aksum, cut off from its trade, begins to fade. But there is another empire watching the same Arab armies, an empire on the other side of the Red Sea, an empire 2,000 years old, an empire that calls itself Roman, but speaks Greek, an empire whose capital had been renamed by an emperor who once made an ally of Caleb of Aksum and asked him to cross the strait against the king of Himyar. That emperor was named Justin. The capital was Constantinople. For the next 800 years, the walls of that city will decide the fate of 3 continents. Arab caliphs will throw armies at them. Bulgarian khans will throw armies at them. Crusaders will throw armies at them. The walls will hold and hold and hold until the day they do not. And when those walls finally fall in 1453, the medieval world ends with them. The next chapter is Byzantium. Subscribe to the long thread. The next civilization is being prepared. Every empire ends. The thread does not.